Can y'all hear me? Say yes or drop a one in the chat. Just want to make sure.
Yes.
Okay, cool. Today I want to talk to you, as you can tell from the background. Anybody want to guess what we're going to chat about this morning? Or for the next probably 2 weeks?
Archetypes.
We're going to talk about your archetypes. And your archetypes are those personalities, those versions of you that we have a tendency to not access. Here's what I mean by that. When we think of archetypes, when we think of Carl Jung talked about it and he called it shadow work. When we do the introspection, the majority of people, my research has shown over the last 30 years, is that most people spend their life in their warrior. It's stress. It's constant fight or flight kind of activities, the way we respond to things. And the closer somebody is to us, the more we have a tendency to, I don't want to say pick a fight, the more often we have a tendency to battle, to be in a place of non-harmony. I'm not going to say total disagreement, but I'm going to say definitely non-harmony. And that's because we sit in our warrior in our entire life. So I want to talk to you about the four primary ones, right? And Jung called them something else. Traditional, less psychological, less psychology language for easier to understand. The archetypes are the sovereign. There's also a male and female version of all of these versions of us, right? If we're male, female, left side, right side, female, male, if we're of these personalities and understandings, then every one of our archetypes too has a male and female version of it. So that being said, the primary version is the gender you currently are. We'll just put it that way, right? And that being said, the first one we want to talk about is the sovereign. That's the king or queen. And the other three are the magician, the lover, and the warrior. Now, what you see up here are the healer and the prince and princess. These are all conversations. These are all versions of your archetypes that I kind of add in. They make it easier to explain some of the things that happen to us when we get all excited and giddy. We're typically a different person when we get excited and giddy. And so I've kind of coined that your prince and princess, your 7-8-year-olds at a birthday party they love, right? That happiness, that joy. All this to be said, it's important to understand that we are multiple personalities. Some of us have a tendency to be that multiple personality in such a way. Maybe you know some people like this, that they are, when they get into a certain situation, they literally change. You know they change. And you know they change, you're like, oh gosh, they're going to be upset. They're going to be this. They're going to be that. And they kind of physically take on a different personality. It literally changes in the body. It changes the way the body acts. It changes the way they look, right? Their face goes to a certain kind of look, and you're like, oh, they're mad. Well, that's their warrior. Or somebody looks at you and your significant other looks at you and you go, what? Why are you looking at me like that? Right? You're being coy. You're being sly. You're being a little, how shall we say, a little romantic. That would be your lover. When they look at you and you have lover eyes, right? You have these things that you just look a certain way at somebody. That's because you change. Your body physically changes. Does this make sense? So the challenge is that when we go after our DMP, when we go after our goal, when we go after this thing that we want most, how many of us, when we go after, let me say this, how many of us know somebody that when we go after a goal, when we set ourselves up and we put all of the things in place, all of the strategies in place for all of the things that we want to achieve, all of the accomplishments we want to do, we do the work, we do affirmations, we do the sticky notes, we write the paper, we give ourselves time to meditate, we do all of these things. And yet, we seem to always have an issue. We seem to always have something that keeps us from our discipline of doing the thing. You want to know who's stepping in? It's not your sovereign. It's not your decision maker. It's your warrior. And as soon as somebody does something that brings light to our lack or causes us to realize we're not doing the thing we do, we bite their heads off. We're behind in our growth. We're behind in our payments. We're behind in all of this stuff. And so we defend our current situation. That's your warrior. Does this make sense? Understanding this could really help you ask who is that? Because it's not the normal self. It's not the self that is normal. So therefore, understanding what Dyer says, Wayne Dyer, change the way you look at things and the things you look at change, will help you understand what Waddles means by saying it's not about doing certain things, it's about doing them in a certain way. Which state are you in when you're making your decision? That's what it comes down to. So the first one we want to talk about is the archetype. And understanding the archetype is the sovereign. The first archetype we want to talk about is the sovereign. And understanding the sovereign is very critical because this is where your decision making comes in. This is where your focus comes in. This is where your ability to stay in a clear path comes in. Does that make sense? And there's a variety of archetypes, right? Understanding this, how this works from neuroencoding. Does that make sense? This is wired into you. Now you're able to shift it. Now there's some things that you have that are unchangeable. Some of your core values that you have, they're not so easy to shift. But understanding the personalities, the way you show up in life is very critical. So let's start with the sovereigns. Sovereigns, you can write it down, king and queen. All right. Question I have for you is if you were to operate into this inner ruler, because that's what your sovereign is. Your sovereign is your inner ruler. Now, when I take you into meditation and I take you into accessing your sovereign, we'll do that. We'll go into the sanctuary and you'll access your sovereign. My research, my experience over the last 3 decades, most people have never really met their sovereign. If they're going, well, archetypes, what is that? There's a good chance they've used their sovereign. Let me say that they've used their sovereign, but they've never met their sovereign. If you've ever made some big business decisions and it turned out well, you used your sovereign. Your sovereign, I should say, your sovereign showed up. And you're like, man, I kind of had this gut feeling. I just had this feeling. That was your sovereign version of you. That was your higher intellect. That was the inner ruler that governs your integrity, your wisdom, and your authority. So this balanced version of your sovereign, which is typically not the case for most, this leads to clarity, vision, and the love of what you're doing. This making sense? So if you're on your DMP path, your definite major purpose path, and you're struggling, you haven't activated your sovereign. You haven't in tuned, you haven't invited, you haven't allowed this best version of you to give you some guidance. Just saying, this is what happens. If you're frustrated, aggravated, and you're lacking and you're not doing the discipline, You don't have anybody in control. You have the crazies are running the asylum. And that happens when we go to shift our identity. When we want to transform our identity, the inmates can take over the asylum. All of the old stories. Many of you have had some old things show up, some challenges, some things that have kept you, taken you out of the game. You've become a reserved player in your game called life. You haven't been able to stay on the court, on the grass, in the field. You've been taken out of the game by a variety of things. And it makes sense that you've been taken out of the game if you don't have somebody who's making the decisions of why you need to stay in the game. And that's called your passion. That's called your clarity, right? That's your lover and your magician. All of this to say, when these start to work in harmony together, Napoleon Hill said a mastermind is a group of 2 or more people working in perfect harmony. Not temporary likeness or kind of association. This is a daily thing. This is an hourly thing working in harmony. And many people find it such a struggle and such a hassle to work on themselves. There's nothing outside of you that can influence you. Hang on. There's nothing outside that can influence you if you know where you're going. It's just there. Influence means takes you off your path, changes the way you do things. I can use the sunlight to help me get better. But if I go outside and not pay attention, I can get burned too. So this idea of understanding our archetypes is really a valuable lesson. And it's really important for you to understand that if you are struggling in your 5 pillars, 6 faith, you're not using your archetype. If you can understand that things that are good for your body and things that are not good for your body, if you take in things that are not good for your body, whose fault is that? Unless you're in some kind of a camp somewhere where they are forcing you and they are mandating for the sake of your life that you have to consume things that does not serve your body, you are the one hurting yourself. It's that simple. If there are things in your body that you take in that do not serve you, that you regret doing the next day or 2 days later, that is your discipline. You have no authority factor over your body when it comes to that. That's called habitual habits. That habit you have wired into yourself, and you have lacked the ability to make the conscious decision to say no more. It's that simple. So that's body. Mind, if you put things in your mind, Jim Rohn said, guard the door of your mind, right? He tells the story, your best friend comes by and puts some sugar in your coffee. Your worst friend, your biggest enemy comes by and puts some sugar in your coffee. What do you got? Sweet coffee. Your best friend accidentally, best business partner accidentally drops some cyanide in your coffee. Accidentally. What do you got? Poison coffee. Moral of the story is guard your coffee. Guard your mind. Guard the doorway to your mind. If you are putting things into your mind, and these things you're putting into your mind or running in your mind is self-doubt, is I'm not good enough. Why aren't they doing something? Is pointing the finger outside. Epictetus said, for those of you with desire, put it on the shelf until such time you realize what's within your circle of influence and what's outside of it. Once you decide what's outside your circle of influence and what you have complete and absolute control over, go back, pick up your desire. You'll never have another bad day. So if you're having bad days, if you're having frustrated days, if you're having agitated days, you are not guarding your mind. You are experience things in life that you have a reaction to that's already wired in. Somebody cut you off in traffic. Isn't that fascinating? Those stupid idiot. Why they do that? They almost hit my car. Blah blah blah. That's you have that wired in, tuned in. It's like the next play. And ready for the next song is aggravation and agitation. You're not using your archetypes. You are not using your sovereign archetype to make a decision. That's body and mind. How about family? Family and relationships and stories you tell about the ones you love or the ones that are around. If they send you off on a tizzy, that's your fault. If they do things you don't like, that's your fault. You have to understand how to sit in that situation and do what's right for you and for them, to not be a jackhole, and adjust accordingly. How about society? If there's people out there, things out there that aggravate you, that's your fault. 100% your fault. Don't have to agree with them, but why are you letting them aggravate you? Why are you letting them agitate you? Isn't that fascinating? If law of attraction works, then anytime you lose your stuff, you're bringing more of that stuff to you. Anything you think about and think about, if you talk about it, the universe thinks you're thankful for it. I'm sorry, but that's the truth. If you talk about it, oh, this must be something worth my time. This must be something worth my space, worth my energy. And the universe goes, well, if you are talking about it, you must want more of it. And when you let that settle in, that may hurt a little bit until you realize you can shift that. Finances, if your finances are where they are, wherever they are, where they are, it's your mind. It's literally your mind. Your finances are 100% driven by the way you act in the world. And Jim Rohn says, you want more income? Bring more value. Well, I'm doing the work. Let's add in Wallace D. Waddles. You want more income? Bring more value in a certain way. If you think you're doing things like everybody else is and they're making money, you ain't. Their certain way is different. And you can't do their certain way. You have to do your certain way. That's why you can model somebody. You can model their tone, their speech, their inflections, their excitement, their enthusiasm, and it just seems because it ain't yours. Doing things in a certain way requires you to understand your best version of you. And that's, again, this comes back to your sovereign. This comes back to your archetype, the king, the queen. If your queen or your king were to show up, if your sovereign was to show up right now, would they approve of your actions? This kingdom that you run, this kingdom that has a requirement, this kingdom that has a focus, this kingdom that has a DMP, would they approve of your current actions? I know what the answer is for me. Oh, hell no. And every day I have a conversation with my archetypes. Every day. Sometimes multiple times a day. And if I'm out blowing leaves, it's a lot of conversation with the archetypes. It's called Kaizen, 1% better every day. Japanese philosophy. So your archetype, this sovereign, there's multiple versions of the sovereign, right? We're just going to talk about the basic one, that is this empowered sovereign that is the king or the queen that you would normally see in movies or in you hear in stories, right? And so I got my notes here. I'm gonna get my glasses on so I can read them. They're just far enough away and not quite close enough. So the empowered sovereign. Now, here's the versions of the sovereign. The empowered sovereign is the clear, the grounded, the responsible, the visionary, makes decisions with courage, compassion, and governs the inner world. That's where 90, I'm going to, again, just from conversations over the last 3 decades, about 90% plus of your decision making happens on the inside. It happens on the inside. They make decisions with courage and compassion, and it governs the inner world that takes aligned and purposeful action. Right? Now I'm going to be creating a whole workbook and a whole series on this because this is so important. The more I talk to CEOs and top leaders in our profession, I see there's this huge gap of awareness of their archetype. And I believe it's going to be valuable for us to understand the versions of us, right? The one that makes the decision to write down the DMP, to set the goal, to get excited, to have this burning desire. Soon as the reality of having to go do new things shows up, we run for the hills. We avoid it like the plague. How many of you have been hearing me talk about build an email list? How many of us have built an email list? I don't care if it's 50 people on it. Now that you built the email list, you got 50 people on it. Do you talk to them once a week? Do you give them a chance to raise their hand? Do you have something to sell them when you talk to them? And that's where most people say, well, no, I mean, I only have 50 people and like 3 people open the email. Why are you making excuses? Why are you making excuses? This is about the discipline of you taking care of and creating the legacy that you want to leave for your whoever you love. Whatever is the legacy you want to leave. Do you talk to your email list? That requires you're sovereign. I say that because somebody's got to make the decision and heads got to roll. If you don't follow the king, heads will roll. We're afraid to upset anybody. So that's the empowered sovereign, right? Then many of us might be using our sovereign, but it's the tyrant. It's the shadow sovereign. It's the controlling. It's the manipulative. It's the rigid. It's the driven by fear and scarcity. See, somebody does make the decision to keep you away from your goal. Do you realize that? You are making the decision. When you don't go after your goal, when you are 30 days, 60 days, 90 days into your activities of building your year-long success and you're nowhere near it, you haven't even started, somebody made that decision, and that decision is you. The challenge is it's not the same you that wrote down the goal. So maybe it's your shadow sovereign. It's this manipulative, lying storyteller that says you're not good enough. You'll never be good enough. Nobody ever loves you. Who's going to love you? They don't love you now. What are they going to do? How are they going to love you when you become successful? And we think if we're in pain, at least we'll get recognition. Man, nothing seems to be going my way. Oh, are you okay? Oh, somebody loves me. I don't know if they love you or they feel sorry for you. Listen, these morning calls are not for the timid. You come here because you're sick and tired of being sick and tired. You come here because enough is enough. And you'll realize is that it's nobody else's fault. And you have to go through what Kyle Cease talks about, the 4 stages. The fear of acknowledging that you are the one 100% responsible for everything. It's not your company. It's not the economy. There's no economy out there. There's only your economy. There really isn't. There is no economy out there. There is only your economy. There is no vision of who's responsible other than you're responsible. And when you finally make that decision, cut off that you're the one responsible for you, nobody else. If you're letting outside influences dictate the way you feel, you're not in control. You're just not. You're not in control. And if you've decided, so you just have to decide, I'm not even going to work on my goals. I'm just going to let other people tell me what to do and how to feel, and how I should be, and how rich I should be, or how healthy I should be. And I'm just not going to put any effort in. Because this idea of putting in temporary effort to have temporary success is a failure. The idea of temporary effort for temporary success, why do it again? I've done this before. Why do it again? Why do it again unless it's going to be the last time? I'm just curious. Then there's the abdicated sovereign. They avoid responsibility. They're disempowered. I can't do anything. I don't know what to do. I'm disconnected from their purpose. Is it possible maybe you're abdicated sovereign, the person who doesn't even show up? They auto pen your life. They may struggle with self-worth and avoid the calming authority. How many of us might know people who are operating from their abdicated sovereign? A lot of times, listen carefully. When you go to a presentation, I don't care what the presentation is. For the sake of conversation, we're going to use network marketing. If you're going to go do a biz op presentation, you're going to show up with some authority, right? You're going to show up as a sovereign. You have to have some knowledge and some experience and some awareness. I don't care if you got one. Listen, the definition of an upline is somebody who enrolled 2 hours before you. Period. Doesn't mean they know more. Doesn't know. Someone who enrolled 2 minutes before you, and they enroll you. That's the definition of an upline. Doesn't give them authority, doesn't give them carte blanche, but a lot of times we think it does. That's a whole nother training. So now you have this presentation you're about to go do. You have to show up. You are showing up as a sovereign. They are showing up with you to give them guidance, for you to lead them, for you to show them. If you're in the wellness world and somebody wants to show up in your world to say, hey, listen, make me feel better. Help me get healthy. Network marketing, help me get wealthy. Legal, help me get safe. Somebody wants to transition from where they are to a new plane in any presentation. They want to transition from where they are to a new plane, to a new level. Does that make sense? So now you show up and you're going to do a presentation on Zoom, over the phone, however you're going to do the presentation. Is it fair to say that the person listening assumes you know what you're talking about? So you're the sovereign. Which version of them do you think it's more likely is going to show up? Listen, I'm going to give you the 4 options. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, empowered. 2, shadow, the controlling, the manipulative, the rigid. 3, the abdicated sovereign, struggle with self-worth, disempowered, disconnected. Or 4, we haven't talked about it, the emerging sovereign, awakening to their power, learning to trust their vision, bargaining, the beginning to lead their life consciously. Which version, for the majority of people, do you think are going to show up? 1, 2, 3, or 4. Empowered, the shadow, the abdicated, or the emerging. I can tell you in my 25 years of network marketing, 23 years in the profession, full time. It's number 3. It's the one who's left the building. They show up, they sound like the empowered, they sound like the emerging. They might even be the shadow. Is this one of those things? That's the shadow. That's the tyrant. Is this one of those things? And it takes the wind out of your sails. How could them saying, is this one of those things, take the wind out of your sail? How is that possible? Because you still believe it's one of those things. I guess. I don't know. It's been never that I ever believed that it was one of those things. So my question to you is this. If you can recognize any of these, listen carefully. If you can the emerging, awakening to their power, learning to trust their vision, and beginning to lead their life consciously. If you can recognize any of these versions because you understand these versions. If I were to start to speak, I don't know, Swahili, and you don't know what Swahili is, you're like, I don't know what that is. If you know what any of these are, if you know what it means to be manipulative or disempowered or awakening to your power or grounded or clear, it's because you have an understanding of them, which means you also have used them. Not saying you're in it right now. I'm just saying that you might have a tendency in your DMN, your default mode network, your DMN, your default mode network, that when you lose your cognitive ability, as soon as you become a little fearful, if you're ever scared when you go to do a presentation, if you're ever a little nervous, nervousness is a nice way of saying I'm scared. I kind of know what I'm doing, but I'm still a little nervous. You realize as soon as you become nervous, there's a good chance you shut down 25% of your ability to think rightly. So if you shut down 25% of your cognitive ability, your brain automatically defaults to fight or flight and activates the amygdala. And we become defensive. We become protective. And if that happens before the presentation starts, one of you is not going to make it to the presentation. I don't know why people can't, they constantly cancel on me. They never seem to keep the appointment. Maybe they can feel your energy. Just make sense? So I'm going to stop right there. I'll go in tomorrow to give you some ideas of how to activate the sovereign, taking you through chakras, taking you through brain talk, taking you through dialogues of language you can use specifically designed to activate that decision-making, empowered version of your archetype. So good morning, good morning, good morning. Takeaways. What'd you hear? What'd you learn? What'd you like? What questions might you have? All right.
Good morning,
I hope everybody
Sean.
has a good day.
Hang on. You're
We'll
not going
wrap
anywhere
this up.
yet.
So, and if the challenges are, this kind of sets you back on your heels, then it's probably a good thing. And I would encourage you, for those of you that have been through the 4 archetype training, go back and read your notes on that. We'll have some fun with it. I'm your head brain training, brain scrambling misfit. I'll see y'all where? At the next event. For some reason, I can't seem, maybe I can't hear you. I think I can hear you, but
I think Sean, can you hear?
I will see you. So, well, hang on.
I think Louise wanted to speak.
Okay, so you can hear me. So, somebody give me some Costa Ricas. Buddha vida. And some Lydias. Peace be with us all. And the queen of the sovereign, helping us make better decisions to serve ourselves, Jessie Lee Ward, the boss Lee, and little white fluffy gurgly. All right, everybody, we will see you all tomorrow morning. Thanks, everybody. Bye for now.